Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Wellness Wednesday. I'm Dr. Lauren Fisher, the host of this show. I am hosting on behalf of the Wellness District of the Delray Business Association, and my goal is to introduce you to some of the cool providers we have here in town and to get you some information that's useful. But first of all, I hope you're all having a wonderful day. If you're not located here in Virginia, I hope it was as warm and the sun was shining. It felt great to be outside today. It felt good to see the light or the day lasting a little bit longer with the light. Vaccines are being dispersed. There is hope on the horizon. So everybody hang in there. We're going to make it back into the recovery or through the next phase and start living more. So get your vaccines so we can hit that threshold and restrictions can be lifted. So before we go on to our guest tonight, I'd like to just tell you a few things from the news category here in Delray. From the Wellness District, actually at my practice at Delray Psych and Wellness, we have an anxiety and stress management workshop. Maybe a surprise to you, but anxiety and stress has been very high lately, but we have one of our licensed professional counselors doing a workshop tomorrow. And I think it's important, we can always, learn a few more techniques, but the stressors that you're feeling right now may be a little bit different than what you felt before, especially with the reintegration back into society and work. So check it out if you want. That's at delraypsych.com. Also, for healthcare workers, one of our other practices here, Healthy Minds Therapy, on March 1st is going to be doing a 90-minute free support group for all healthcare workers. That's going to run for 12 weeks. And we'll get that in the chat box, but at healthymindsTherapy.com. Also on their Facebook, I know that there is a link. And then lastly, there's a blood drive on March 16th, sponsored by the Wellness District, and we could use your blood, and we appreciate the donors. There's also one on April 6th, so if you go onto our Facebook page or onto visitdelray.com, you can sign up there. Also, just in general, following Visit Delray and the Wellness District for all the latest updates on everything that's Delray and Alexandria. All right, great. So let's move on to our featured guest of the evening. I'd like to introduce Lauren Engler, tell you a little bit about her. She's a pediatric sleep consultant who specializes in helping children and infants of all ages to develop healthy sleep habits. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am glad to have you. And I forgot to say your business name, which is Via Graces, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I bet you are a savior for many families.
I know firsthand what sleeplessness feels like, and I want to help as many families not have to feel that way. So it's definitely been fun for me and benefits my family as well. So.
Awesome. Well, I know you have a lot of great information, and we're going to get to that, sharing things that are very important for parents to know about sleep and naps and wake cycles. But Lauren, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, how you got into this part of this business?
Yeah. So as Lauren said, my name is Lauren Engler, and I am a local pediatric sleep consultant. I was actually a former teacher, but when I had my first daughter, who's now 3.5, her name is actually Olivia Grace, and that's my business's namesake. So Via Graces is after Olivia Grace because she was my non-sleeper. So she was actually surprisingly a fairly good sleeper as a newborn, not because of anything that we did. She just came out and enjoyed sleep, which we were very grateful for, and also gave us a little, pep in our step, like, yeah, we've got this. We understand baby sleep. Everything's going to be great. And then she hit the 4-month regression, which any of you listening who have a baby or a child, you probably remember something happening around 4 months old, and her sleep went out the window. Anything that had been great before was really not great. And it also happened to be when I was going back to work. It was after the holidays. We didn't have much help anymore. And rather than just waking up once or twice a night, she went to waking up 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 times a night. And we
Wow.
just entered survival mode because my husband and I were working and we were tired. There's my sweet Olivia Grace coming home from the hospital. And she would, wake up in the middle of the night and I would nurse her and rock her and lay her back down. And she'd wake up and I'd nurse her, rock her, lay her back down. And we did this until she was 10 months old, until I was on summer break. And I was like, listen, I am not the teacher I want to be. I'm not the mom I want to be, the wife, the friend. Something has to change. And it wasn't until we actually started sleeping that we recognized how much our lack of sleep was affecting us. And so then when I was pregnant with my second daughter, I was like, something has to change. We can't do this again. And I had countless friends struggling with their children's sleep. I always like to enter those conversations with them to try to brainstorm because I knew what it felt like to be there. And that led me into the world of sleep consulting.
Well, thank you for sharing. I know a lot of people are get into the work they do because they've helpful, and I've lived the story, and I am sure that
Mm-hmm.
is super helpful for people because you are an actual mom, you've got two children, you've been through these
Yes.
stages. But you speak of the sleep deprivation, and that's something we definitely see in our practice as well. Parents in survival mode, as you said,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and often parents, and I think you could speak to this, feel very overwhelmed, and they
Mm-hmm.
get lots of opinions from everybody, and then they're just
Yes.
overwhelmed. They're like, we're too tired to care, we're just going to wait it out and hope this passes.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they, I think, struggle with where to find services. So this is why we're very grateful to have you in the district, because there are always a lot of let's say, I wanted to say pregnant people in Delaware, which is true, but lots of mothers with children. So, and other families too as well. So let's talk about the services you actually provide and what it looks like to work with you.
Yeah, so I actually serve families of newborns all the way until around 10 years old. So I say once kids hit puberty, they're kind of in the adult world because now hormones are kind of in the way, so it looks a lot different. But from newborns through around, like I said, age 10, I'm able to help those families. So of course, it looks very different depending on the child's age. But for newborns, we're certainly not sleep training. That wouldn't be developmentally appropriate yet. But by learning how to structure their day, learning when are they actually tired? How do I know when to lay them down? What do I do to lay them down? Do I hold them? How do I get them to sleep in their crib? What do routines look like? A lot of that is really helpful to start day one home from the hospital or
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks home after you're slowly getting out of that newborn fog. But there are actually things that we can start doing in those first 12 weeks of life where, again, we're not sleep training. We're certainly not expecting any sleeping through the night, but where we can really start establishing healthy sleep foundations that lead into better sleep for babies and for older children. Once we reach around 4 months old, that dreaded 4 month regression I talked about is actually because babies are transitioning from underdeveloped newborn cycles to now having adult like four adult like sleep cycles. And so a lot of our kids sleep changes for the worse because they're going
Mm-hmm.
through a physical change with their sleep and they're kind of getting stuck between sleep cycles. They've not done this before, which is why their sleep tends to kind of tank around 4 months old. The good news there, however, is not only is their sleep is adjusting, so they're able to sleep longer stretches. Their naps can finally start lengthening because it's a little bit more developed. But around that
Mm-hmm.
time is also when they're really starting to discover their hands, and they might be starting to
Mm-hmm.
roll or get comfortable on their stomach, and their ability to self-soothe is a lot stronger than it was as a newborn. And so now at 4 months old, even though we still certainly don't expect a 4 month old to sleep through the night without needing a night feeding, some can. That's definitely not an expectation. But it's around 4 months old that we can start doing more official training, helping teach our kids to fall asleep in their bassinet, in their crib, whichever environment the parents are more comfortable with. And so when kids are in a crib, of course, sleep training looks a lot different because they're in the crib. Generally, their communication is a little bit lower, and so I walk parents through a plan of how are we going to lay your child down and eventually walk away, which usually doesn't start with just laying them down and walking away because they need support. They need comfort trying something new, but they also need some space and time to figure it out. And so I walk families through what is that going to look like? What are some daytime routines we can put into place to make sure we're best supporting their sleep? Because we all know that sleep is not just something that happens at night, but everything we do during the day impacts our sleep, whether that's negatively or positively. And then, of course, once kids get into that big kid bed and they're older, they've got some more language, communication. They might have some fears or just several years of habits behind them. That plan takes a little bit longer. I love actually including the kids on the phone call if they're old enough to just talk through, hey, here are going to be your goals, and you're going to color these pictures on your wall to remember to lay down in bed and to be
Mm-hmm.
quiet. But
Mm-hmm.
at this point, it's really about setting boundaries and teaching the kids what's expected of them at bedtime. But then also, like I said, with the babies, with older kids, we still need to come alongside of them, comfort them, support them, actually teach them how to sleep rather
Mm-hmm.
than just expecting them to figure it out. To
Right.
give them the confidence that they can actually do it, and whether it's a baby plan at the end of 2 weeks or an older child plan at the end of 3 weeks, they're falling asleep on their own, and again, if developmentally appropriate, sleeping through the night, which is amazing.
Yeah, great. So if I understand you correctly, like at least the first 4 months, really you're helping parents set up that foundation for good
Mm-hmm.
sleep.
Yes.
And do you want to get into sleep wake cycles, like what's normal for then?
Yeah.
Because I'm
Yeah,
assuming
that
like
would
the
be great.
information is good, so parents they can know what to expect, right? And
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
So a big piece of newborn world is just again understanding what their needs are. So we actually have a chart that would be really helpful for you to see what babies are actually able to handle, how much time they're actually able to handle being awake before getting into overtiredness. So a big struggle parents have with their newborns is they come home from the hospital, and of course we love snuggling them, we love playing with them, looking at them, cooing. But then all of a sudden they are crying and the crying doesn't stop. And now they've been awake for 2 or 3 hours and the crying just does not seem to end. And a lot of that is actually due to overtiredness. So on this chart, you can actually see, depending on our kids' ages, starting right in newborn world and going through past the age of 1, depending on how old they are, there are certain awake windows that are developmentally appropriate for them. So if you look at that chart in that newborn world, 0 to 6 weeks, 6 to 12 weeks, when we first bring our babies home, 45 to 60 minutes is really the max amount of time they can handle before becoming overtired. And for those of us with kids, we know that an overtired baby is not only really hard to get to sleep, but they also have a really hard time staying asleep. And so, if nothing else in newborn world, following these awake windows is key. So what that might look like is if you have a 6 week old and they woke up to start the day at 7:30 a.m., okay, at 6 weeks old, my baby can only handle about 60 minutes awake. So if they woke up at 7:30, at 8:30 we need to be moving towards sleep. Now, that doesn't mean the baby has to be asleep, sound asleep by themselves in their crib. It might, but even if you're like, you know what, we want to snuggle our baby, or grandma and grandpa are here, they want to hold them, or we're in the car or something. We just need to be giving our babies the opportunity to sleep at that time to avoid that overtiredness. So maybe rather than cooing and smiling at them, we just put them up on our shoulder so they can finally rest and close their eyes. Or if we want to try for a crib or a bassinet nap, we might swaddle them up, lay them down at that 60-minute mark, and start patting their belly, shushing them, offering a pacifier, so they're not getting stimulated beyond what they can actually handle. And so, like I said, if nothing else in newborn world, awake windows are so, so, so important to avoid that overtiredness so we can get the best sleep possible. And those awake windows carry into baby world as well. That's some of the
Mhm.
most foundational piece of the sleep plans I write for the families of newborns and babies.
Yeah, so that was a great chart, and like what a great guide for people to know. I think a lot of people just try to figure things out, and I like
Mm-hmm.
the guidance. And I'm also kind of thinking because from people who do not have children, such as myself and others, sometimes they get frustrated when like they're like, "Oh, I can't see my family because they're like they had to leave. They're on the baby schedule, right?" And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, "But why?" And when you really put it in perspective, the schedule is so important, right?
Yeah.
And the sleep for all the reasons you're saying over tiredness, but also, right, you can tell me, but I know in infancy, like the brain, at least the first 3 years, the brain is like
Mm-hmm.
developing at rapid speed, and so a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that happens sleeping, like the growth
Yeah.
hormone protecting against
Yeah.
your synapses. So if you want your
Yeah.
child to develop in the healthiest possible way,
Mm-hmm.
forego
Mm-hmm.
the party or the snuggling and let them sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember actually it was I think this past Christmas, maybe 2 Christmases ago, when my now 16-month-old was she was just 2 or 3 months old. And I remember my sister saying, like, she's going to sleep again. Wasn't she just sleeping? And I was like, yeah, she was. And yes, she's going to sleep again. And in the same
Mhm.
breath, she would be like, man, she doesn't cry nearly as much as Olivia did. And I'm like, yeah, because she's actually sleeping. And so it was so funny where they'd be like, what? What do you
Mhm.
mean she has to sleep again? but also recognizing, man, she's so much more calm. She's so much more relaxed than Olivia. And I'm like, that's because sleep changes everything for both adults and for
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah, so you were really able to see that,
Hmm.
having gone through more of a difficult, stretch without the knowledge, and then being able to
Yeah.
implement that. And so, when you said, at 4 months, like sleep training begins, what does
Hmm.
that actually mean?
Yeah. So the idea behind sleep training is your end goal is to be able to lay your child down for bedtime, lay them down for most naps. We know, especially when they're napping all the time, a lot of naps will happen on the go. We still want to enjoy some snuggly naps, but the goal of sleep training would be, at the end of that 2 weeks, to be able to walk through your bedtime routine, lay your kids down, and know that when you lay them down awake, we're not, nursing them to sleep. If parents want to nurse their kids to sleep too, I say, like, that's totally fine. Know that they're certainly relying on you. And for us, we had seasons where nursing to sleep was really sweet, and then we had a season where it just did not work anymore. But so the goal of sleep training would be to lay our kids down awake, be able to walk away, close the door, and know that they're going to fall asleep. Independently, peacefully. That doesn't mean they're going to cry for 30 minutes. There might be some crying on the onset of sleep training as we're starting to teach them those skills. Like I said, we're going to provide a lot of comfort and support through that because it is new. But the goal of sleep training is to teach our kids those independent sleep skills. So when we lay them down for bedtime, when we lay them down for their naps, they're able to fall asleep independently. And then as they reach an age where it's developmentally appropriate to sleep through the night, or their bodies are just physically ready to. And I've seen 4 months old do that, and I've seen 6 month olds do that. So it really varies depending on their age and their health. But when they're ready, that transition to sleeping through the night generally happens very seamlessly because they've got the skills to do it. And so if they slip out of one sleep cycle, like we all do in the middle of the night, rather than waking up and looking for someone to come feed them or someone to come rock them or someone to pull them into bed, they're like, oh, wait a second, I've done this before. And they go right back to sleep.
Yeah, that's great. It's really the heart of like developing like secure attachment to like
Mm-hmm.
supporting your child and their needs,
Yes.
but also like empowering them to have the skills and abilities to take
Yes.
care of themselves, which will
Mm-hmm.
translate throughout life too.
Absolutely.
And I know that people, especially, we as adults carry our own, our own emotions and beliefs about ourselves. And so sometimes I know that people's fears, or they think they're not being good parents, so they want to snuggle or spend extra time, or,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes even though their intentions may be good with soothing, it may be not necessarily executed the right time or in the right way. So,
Yeah. And it's really interesting because there can be such a negative connotation with sleep training of like, but why does this exist? People that didn't have sleep trainers 100 years ago. And I often talk to people, or we'll talk on the phone and they'll be like, oh, I don't want to say this to you, but I nurse my child to sleep. And I'm like, you know what? My job is not at all to judge you or to tell you you're doing something wrong.
yeah.
I know a lot of people who nurse their babies to sleep or who co-sleep and they enjoy it and it works for their family. And when
Hmm.
it works for you, I say, absolutely do it.
Yeah.
Right? We all have to make choices that work best for us and our
Hmm.
families. I help the families that get to that place where they're like, I say I work with one of two families. Either the people who get to a place where they're like, we can't keep going on like this, kind of the position that I was in,
Yeah.
3 years ago. We can't keep doing this. Something needs to change. Or I also work with families who are like, you know what? It's not that bad yet, but I've seen where it can go. So I want help right now to avoid that. But so for families who, like I said, enjoy that rocking to sleep, they're okay to sit in their child's room until they fall asleep at night. That's great because it works. And then for the families who are like, listen, I need my evenings. Like right now, my husband's putting my girls to bed and we know they're going to go to sleep. Like that's just, it's 7:20. And so I know in about 5 minutes, my 3.5-year-old will be down. And I know my 16-month-old is already down. And there's so much freedom in that. And for us in our relationship and like I said, our work, that's really important for our family to be able to love on them during the day, lay them down at night, knowing they're going to fall asleep confidently and happily, and know that we can all wake
Yeah.
up together in the morning, well rested and ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome because I'm sure as a parent, a lot of your day is dedicated by choice to your children. So that
Yeah.
little bit of time you have at night, which is you time, is really
Mm-hmm.
important. And that's something I hear
Yes.
a lot from my clients. They're just like, the kids are staying up till 10 or 11. And then I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, well, have you thought about changing the routines? And they're like, it's a lot of
Right.
work. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the way. Let's talk about the people like that camp of people who seek you out when they're kind of like at their wits' end. Talk to us
Mm-hmm.
about maybe a case example, or some of the things you see, and then like what you do with parents.
Yeah. So I would say the most common reason parents come to me is maybe they just dread bedtime. Like all day long, they are gaining more and more anxiety because they're like, I don't know how long it's going to take to fall asleep. I'm the only one who can do it. Maybe if it's a nursing mom, I'm the only one who can put her to sleep, and I might have to nurse and re-nurse her 5 times. Or actually, my husband does a great job, but I don't know if he's going to come back in 20 minutes or in 2 hours. And they just want to avoid that bedtime battle. Or if it's a 3 or 4 or 5 or 8-year-old, I've worked with families of 8-year-olds who have never gone to sleep on their own and slept through the night. And
Mm-hmm.
these parents are like, I can't do this anymore. So, initially being able to fall asleep at bedtime is, independently is um, probably the number one issue, which is very often connected to waking throughout the night. So if a child is not yet sleeping through the night and physically, developmentally, they should be ready to, it's almost always connected to what's happening at bedtime, what's happening in the bedtime routine, and teaching them those independent sleep skills helps that solve the night wakings issue pretty quickly. Um, Another common issue that's generally connected to night wakings. Sometimes I do have families who they are seemingly doing everything right, but for whatever reason, their child always starts the day at 5 or 5:30 a.m. and they're like, I just can't keep starting my day this early. So early morning wakings are a common challenge I see. Again, a lot of that happens to be connected to what we're doing at bedtime. What does that routine look like? And maybe you are able to walk away and put your child to sleep, but if they were even drowsy going to sleep, that could impact those mornings. Or if they stayed awake too late, they might be so overtired that they actually can't sleep any longer in the morning because their body's, ready to go. And so, falling asleep at bedtime, night wakings, early morning wakings, short naps are also often connected. As you can see, these are all kind of one and the same. But if a child struggles to fall asleep on their own, their naps are likely going to be short because they can't connect those sleep cycles
Mm-hmm.
without, again, needing some help. And so, yeah, those are very common challenges I work through with families. And the great thing is yeah, there are often changes we have to make, right? We need to make some tweaks to the routine, some tweaks to the schedule to make sure it's,
Mm-hmm.
best serving this child in their sleep. But if a mom comes to me who's a breastfeeding mom, I'm a breastfeeding mom. I'm still nursing my 16-month-old. A
Mm-hmm.
mom can absolutely keep breastfeeding and still get sleep. So we're going to pull, nursing and sleep a little bit apart from each other so our babies aren't falling asleep on the breast. But a breastfeeding mom can absolutely have a baby that sleeps, and a bottle feeding, baby, or a, formula fed,
Mm-hmm.
or like I said, a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old who just enjoys milk with their dinner. All of those kids can sleep because it's a skill we teach them. It's not
Mm-hmm.
simply I hope they'll figure it out when they're ready, because there are some kids who
Yeah.
honestly don't. And so it's, what's empowering is that this is actually something we can teach our kids rather than just waiting for them to figure it out.
So with the thank you, lots of great information here. So let's say like with the older, let's say older children, we'll say the 5, 6, 7, 8, like that early elementary school.
Yeah.
So if we did have someone who was a parent's like, hey, they keep popping out of their room, they're just kind of hyper, they're not ready for bed. What would be some of the advice that you would give, or some of the skills you might recommend?
Yeah, so with our older kids, it is almost all about boundaries and expectations. And so this is my former
Mhm.
teacher coming in. I taught K-2 for several years, but the way that I like to describe it is actually with a trampoline, because we actually have a trampoline in our backyard. And I remember the first time my Olivia got on a trampoline, it did not have fencing or the gate, the netting around it, and she stood in the middle and would not move. And she would sometimes bounce a little bit, but she would not jump. She would not move from that center of the trampoline. And I was like bouncing around the trampoline like a crazy person, nervous that she was going to fall off. And, where am I going to be when I need to catch her? Because there were no walls or there were no boundaries. And so in that case, she didn't feel safe to move because she had no clue what the boundaries were and what's going to happen if I slip off the edge. And I was a nervous wreck because I had no idea what's going to happen if she accidentally steps this way. But now we're in a house that has a trampoline with that netting around it. And as soon as she was on that trampoline, she is a wild child around that thing, jumping
Mhm.
and rolling, and she'll purposely bounce into those walls. And she has the time of her life. And for me, I'll stand there and watch her and like, okay, I hope she doesn't fall the wrong way, but
Yeah.
I know she's contained. And so those walls or those boundaries are keeping her safe. They're making
Mhm.
me feel sane and calm. And that's what we need to
Mhm.
do when it comes to bedtime with our older kids. So for our older kids to be able to fall asleep independently and confidently, and for us to be able to walk through the bedtime routine calmly and confidently, we need to all be aware of what the boundaries are and what's going to happen if I push on those boundaries. Oh, they're going to catch me. The boundaries are actually going to stay there. Where if one night we can read 4 books and the next night we can just read 1 and the next night we can read 9 books, or mom
Mhm.
will lay with me in bed but dad walks away, or so and so gives me a pacifier. If those boundaries are loose and ever changing, we're not going to have the calm and the confidence to know what to expect, and our kids likewise are not going to know what to expect. So again, simple boundaries we talk about with older kids is, okay, so now you have some bedtime rules. So your 3 bedtime rules are: you're going to lay down, you're going to be quiet, which hint hint, in order to sleep you need to be laying down and quiet. So I'm also teaching
Mhm.
you how to actually fall asleep.
Yeah.
And then I love, so there are things called Toddler Clocks, which my favorite is the Hatch Baby Rest. It's essentially a little light you can adjust on your phone, but at nighttime, red means bed. And so when that red light is on, that means you're laying down and you're quiet. And when it turns blue or green or purple, you get to get out of bed in the morning. So having those rules of you lay down, you're quiet, and you stay in bed until your light turns blue. Now establishing those rules doesn't mean like, okay, now because the rules are up on the wall, they're going to do it. Well, no, because now they say, okay, you're telling me these are the boundaries. What happens if I start to push on them? So what happens if I get out of bed? What happens if I start singing at the top of my lungs? Or, what happens if I get out of bed at midnight and 3 a.m. and 5 a.m.? And we have to show them, right, well, so I'm going to walk you back every time because red means bed. And if you get out of bed, maybe I'll take your levy for a moment, or I'm going to walk out of the room for a moment because you're breaking these rules essentially. And
Mhm.
the natural reward is you'll get to hang on to your levy, or I will sit here until you fall asleep for a small portion of the time. When I work with older families, I do start with the parents right in the room, sitting with their kids, because that's
Mhm.
what they know. But also
Yep.
being in the room, those parents can lay those boundaries. So, okay, you got out of bed. I'm going to have to pop out for a minute because you didn't follow that rule. There's a natural
Yep.
consequence. And so, in that, we're building those boundaries where
Right.
they're going to be pushed on, right? Because that's how kids figure out what they are. But once they realize those boundaries exist and they're going to stick to them, then again, a couple weeks later, we have our kids sleeping because they are confident in those
Yep.
boundaries and they know they can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And the consistency, right? Consistency is key. They say it
Mm-hmm.
for a reason, but especially with
Yeah.
parents, not only in the rules, but among each other too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I know you and I were talking about. Sometimes the reasons why things don't happen is because the
Yeah.
parents are coming with their own beliefs, but you guys can all step together for the common cause, which is, again,
Yes.
it's a win. But you're right. When you change, especially, I know it's hard for parents if they haven't had the boundaries and they're putting it in, and like you said, you're going to get resistance first with any like behavioral extinction. It goes up and then
Mm-hmm.
it gets better,
Yes.
because you said they see they can't push it. And it also, right, I love the trampoline analogy, like that really does make them say boundaries and rules make people
Mm-hmm.
safe and healthy, and helps kids, figure out life a little bit easier. Even it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean you're a mean parent or that you're, even if they're disappointed, it's okay for them to be uncomfortable if you're doing it for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So that was well said. We have a few more minutes. You were going to tell us a little bit about daylight savings time, because that's coming up, and that never
It
even
is.
crossed my mind that might. I mean, I know it messes up my cat's feeding schedule, but
Yeah.
I assume he has children too. So tell me how parents
Yes.
navigate that.
Absolutely. And Lauren, I'm not sure if we said this at the beginning, but for those of you who are watching, if you do have questions, feel free to paste those in the box. We would love to answer them with the few minutes we have left. But yes, daylight savings is coming. For those of you who did not know, that popped up under my radar way too quickly. But March 14th, our clocks are going to change. I actually have a blog post all about springing forward. because it's confusing, to be honest. And so I actually have little screenshots you can take depending on your child's age, what their schedule will actually look like as you make those adjustments. So you can go ahead and screenshot those images to have them on your phone as we begin. But essentially, our clocks are going to change around 2 a.m. on Sunday, March 14th. And so when we wake up in the morning, maybe we're used to waking up at 7 o'clock a.m., our clocks are actually going to say 8 a.m. Our bodies are going to feel like it's 7. So some of us really enjoy springing forward because it feels like we get an extra hour of sleep. Those of us with kids, it feels nice to wake up with a clock saying 8. Of course, we know that our sleep didn't actually change. But what we're going to be doing is if our kids wake up normally at 7, the clock says 8. If they generally take a nap around 9:30, we certainly can't put them down at 9:30 because rather than if they're used to being awake for 2.5 hours, if the clock says 8, we can't put them down just an hour and a half later. They're not actually going to be ready yet. So for the kids who are on some sort of napping schedule, we're actually going to be adjusting their schedule by about 15 minutes every 2 days to eventually, by the end of the week, get their schedule back to normal. So if they usually wake up in the morning at 7 and take a nap at 9:30, daylight savings, they woke up and it actually says 8 o'clock. So we're not going to put them to sleep until 10:15. So almost it's gonna look on the clock like it's an hour later, but we're just actually putting them down about 15 minutes sooner than usual, so that again they're still tired enough to fall asleep. But essentially, for kids napping, we're bumping their nap schedules by about 15 minutes every 2 days, so that by day 7, if they normally wake up at 7 and take a nap at 9:30, by the following Sunday, that nap will finally be back at 9:30. Like I said, I know it sounds really confusing here, so that blog has those images to help you. For older kids, my 3.5-year-old doesn't take a nap anymore. She has a quiet time during the day. So I have a quiet time during the day, but she does not take a nap anymore. So she can handle more of a change. So she usually, this is not true of all kids. She usually wakes up at 8 in the morning, which I know is wonderful. My 16-month-old is up at 7, so it's not totally glamorous. But she wakes up around 8. She goes to bed around 7:15. So for her, I'm going to bump her bedtime back. The clock will say 8 o'clock on the first day. Her body's going to feel like it's 7 o'clock. So just adjusting, again, that bedtime by 15. You could even do 30 minutes and just do that over a couple days. And again, by day 3 or 4, for the non-nappers, we can get them back on schedule because when they're awake 12 hours at a time, being awake for 11 and a half hours is not going to be a huge difference. They can handle that change, run them outside, make sure we're getting that daylight. But essentially, I say wait until Sunday morning, wait until those clocks change. And then if you, start adjusting your kid's schedule by 15 or 30 minutes so that by the end of the week, you're there. And for those of you listening to this who are like, that sounds crazy, this is way too confusing, I'm just going to wing it. Honestly, that's okay too. Before I was a sleep consultant, we just winged it. And honestly, by the end of the first or second week, we're all pretty much back to where we were. And if you're not, there might be something else going with your kiddo sleep that we can dig into. But for those who are like, daylight savings is coming, I can't ruin anything, head to that blog post. You'll see those schedules that will help you greatly.
Awesome. I just want to say hello to some of our loyal followers, Bridget, Allie, Steve, Gail, and Gail. Yes, this will be recorded. There's probably a lot of moms right now and dads putting their children down. We're in that sweet spot. But I think we probably all can attest that at least most of us know at least one person that is struggling with sleep patterns. So this information has been really great. And I love the information on your website, viagraces.com. I caught some, there's some blogs about sleep products, about attachment concerns, naps, sleep regression. You really have a wealth of information there. Oh, hello, Lucelle. Hello to Lucelle too. You said that anyone that works with you offer a 30-minute consultation for free. Is that correct?
Yeah, about a free 20-ish minutes.
20.
But for those who, whether they're like, yes, I need this help right now, or like, would this be a good fit for me? Can she actually help me with my child's sleep? I always start by offering a 20-minute phone call, a free phone call where I'm just going to ask you questions about your child's sleep, what your sleep goals are, and then I'm able to share with you my different package options that would serve your family well. And so then from there, parents can say like, yes, this is something that I want to do. Let's get started. Or, hey, maybe this isn't a right fit right now. Or, oh man, we're moving. There might not be time here, maybe down the road. So if anyone is wondering if this is a good fit for them, like I said, I always start with that free 20-minute phone call, which if you head to, like Lauren said, viagraces.com, you can actually sign up for that free phone call right on that homepage. And I would love to talk to anybody interested in seeing what it would look like to work together.
Okay, great. And in our conclusion, if you had one piece of advice for new parents, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to say give yourself lots of grace. So that's also with my business name. Via Graces is after my Olivia
Yes.
Grace, but also in parenthood, we need to give ourselves grace. We need to give our kids grace. We need to
Yes.
give our spouses grace. And so parenting is hard. I am right in the throes of parenthood with you. Parenting is hard, especially in a pandemic right now. But it requires a lot of grace, and things are going to be ever changing. Like Lauren said earlier, there is so much information out there, and it can be really overwhelming to weed through. So give yourself grace. Know that when you wake up tomorrow, it is a new day. And we kind of get to start over a little bit every day. And if we want to change something from yesterday, we get to do that tomorrow. So yeah, biggest piece of advice is give yourself lots of grace and know that there are people out there, again, sleep consultants, lactation consultants, counselors. Again, the school system in this area is so great. When we need support, there is going to be someone who is specialized in that area who can absolutely help us. So
Right.
give yourself grace and don't be afraid to reach out.
I love that piece of advice. Yes, you don't need to know it all. And,
Mm-hmm.
we have a very educated viewership here and area, and everybody just feels like they can figure it out. But as my child psychologist friends say, they're like, why read the internet and all these books when you can just call a therapist or a specialist such as
Yes.
yourself, and we can save you a whole lot of time and
Mm-hmm.
energy. So, I
Yes.
think that's especially for new parents too, you many feel you need it to have it all figured out, and you don't. We don't ever
Mm-hmm.
have anything all figured out in life. We're all on a learning path. So we are so
Mm-hmm.
glad to have you in our community, Lauren. Thank you for sharing your information with everybody
Of
tonight,
course.
and we look forward to working with you. All right,
Yeah. Thank
have
you
a
for having
great
me.
you're welcome. Have a great evening.
You too.
All right, super. Well, that was our pediatric sleep consultant, Lauren Engler, with tons of good information. Please pass this on to your friends or new moms that you know. I just want to leave you with a few things. We've got some shows coming up. Tomorrow is dinner and DYI with Alexandria's Makers Market, Elisa Kovich. There is they're eating dinner, and there's a heart and Virginia state ornament that you can make. You can pre-order them at Alexandria Makers Market and pick them up at Takira Poblano. So, and if it suits you well, you can pick Rita to do your craft with. On Monday, we have March 1st, Living on Music with Steve Hauk, who is our great host. And he will be featuring, Michael Tash, who is a blues guy, from what I hear. And on Tuesday, March 2nd, coming from you live at the Zebra Studios at Alexandria Community, the podcast hosts of We Should Talk About That will be featured, and they will be talking about women getting back into the workforce. As you know, it is an important topic. Many women, I think almost as much as 3 million, have left the workforce during the pandemic. So tune into this podcast and this show on March 2nd. And I believe all the shows are at 7 p.m. If I'm wrong, Mary or Lucille are going to type it right now in the chat and correct me. But thank you to Mary, Lucille, and Susan for all the wonderful things you do with the Zebra Press and bringing all this great information to everybody. Okay, so you are welcome to move on with your day and evening. Thank you for tuning in. Check back in 2 weeks with me. I will have Jen Schwartz of Impact Fitness, and we'll be talking about some other health related stuff. All right. Don't forget to be the good news in someone's life. Take care.